as I told the gentleman in the front row, I'm a little nervous. I am not the most gifted public speaker, so, but I am very, very, very passionate about the Laserfiche suite of products. I've worked with a lot of different software over my very, very long tenure in the business world, and I have never seen a software that is as user-friendly and easy to implement as this particular suite of products, and not to mention the fact that it acts like it's on steroids with the number of enhancements that come out every year. It truly is a unique community and a unique product. So welcome, everybody. I want to start off this presentation before I go any further with publicly thanking my HR team. Without their support, we could not have created what we did. We did create 36 HR forms, but we have over 60 forms in the repository because we have deployed this everywhere in our business, from the receiving department to the sales department to the merchandising department. It has just morphed out everywhere after people got used to seeing what we built and how easy it was to work with. I'd also like to thank the guys at Cities Digital, for without their patience and skill, the system could not have been developed. I pushed the limits of their experience, and we both learned together. So what we're going to be covering today is the why. Then we're going to dive into the process, from applicant tracking to onboarding to I-9 management. Then we're going to talk about converting your HR files, security, and then designing the HR process. So why did we do this? Because to continue to have generated paper and trying to analyze the data on the paper, I would have had to increase my staff. So the decision internally in the company was driven by a need for economics and efficiency. And included in that savings that Lynda mentioned before, there were costs I forgot about, systems that I no longer had to pay software support on, and file cabinets that I no longer had to buy. So really, the savings is much greater than $80,000 when I stopped to add in other costs. And I think this will become apparent on the next couple of slides. So who is Steinhafels? Well, geographically, we're located in southern half of Wisconsin and northern Illinois. We have 10 full-line furniture stores, soon to be 11th. February 8th, we open another 130,000 square foot furniture store. We have 9 retail mattress stores, 1 manufacturing facility, 721 employees. That was when I put this together. Today, we're closer to 750. And we've been in business 80 years. So, what could possibly go wrong with this structure? Well, if any of you have worked for an old, established organization, I'm sure you've heard this statement. But we've always done it that way. I had my share of challenges when I first presented the idea of going paperless. I had huge pushback from my well-entrenched and divine 40-year-old office manager who thought we couldn't change the way we did payables. And after a couple months of kind of putting up with it, I gently walked her into my office one day and said, it's not if we're going to do this, it's when. So sometimes you have to coax, and sometimes you kind of have to say, no, this is what we're going to do. So what were the issues? Lost paperwork. No one here has ever had lost paperwork, have they? Awesome. Inconsistent orientation practices. So my remote managers, some would do it right, and some would do it half right, and some would have to redo it. Lack of confidentiality. I don't consider dropping an employee's personal information into an inter-office envelope with a little string tie to be very confidential. Misfiled paperwork. We employ a lot of families with the same last name. Inconsistent execution of documentation by my managers. Delayed paperwork. So sitting on Fred's desk is a stack of HR forms that he needs to review, and they sit there for a month before they would get to HR for our review. Lack of transparency. One manager does not know what the other one did just a week and a half ago. So basically, we had more issues than Reader's Digest. And then some ancillary issues. This is a picture of the payroll office. And this is a picture of the big fireproof file cabinets that are currently located in the payroll office. We converted all of the personnel files in them and stored them in Laserfiche. Unfortunately, my owners still like the little bit of paper security that exists by having those files, so they wouldn't let me shred them immediately. They said, wait 1 year, and then you can shred them. I said, okay. The other cost, which a lot of times you don't think about, is that a fireproof file cabinet of this size is about $4,200 investment. So I have $8,400 of my company's money tied up into that system right there. So I'm really looking forward to March 2015 when I can bring in giant shredding bins, fill them, and then post these for sale on Craigslist. That's the plan. The downside is, unfortunately, besides these two, I have 24 other of these monsters throughout my facility. You can do the math. So what did we need to do? We needed to create one platform that allowed information flow and transparency across different systems, locations, and managers. And how did we solve it? We sourced and looked at a lot of programs and decided on Laserfiche, the repository, the workflow, and of course, forms. So we're going to start at the beginning of our process. Like I said before, in the HR department, we needed one platform to manage all the information that we had. That included getting rid of systems that did not talk to each other, such as my HR Smart applicant tracking system, which did not communicate with my HRIS system, which did not communicate to my learning management system. So we recreated and replaced our applicant tracking system with Laserfiche. You can initiate a requisition, cross-post to job boards, receive employment applications, track applications, extend offers, and onboard, all with Laserfiche. There were 2 items that I forgot about and left out of this. We also do all of our background checks, and all of our pre-employment assessments are deployed through Laserfiche through linking to that vendor's website and having automated processes go out and queue for those things to be done. As an overview, this is what it looks like. I like a picture because visually it's great. So the manager creates a job requisition. It's approved. It goes out and posts. Applicants see it on the job board. They're brought back into our system. They fill out a job application. It's routed to the manager. The manager makes a reject or advance decision, and then the prospect is tracked internally in our system through the use of statuses and metadata. So this is a picture of our job requisition form, which the manager fills out. We have standardized job descriptions and job titles that they populate into this form. They click submit, and the form is routed to our recruiting manager. Our recruiting manager receives an email with an embedded link. She clicks on that, opens up the job requisition, reviews it for spelling mistakes and other things that may not be quite right before it's posted to a job board. But once she finalizes it, decides which job boards it's going to be posted to in the metadata, she simply clicks submit and it goes. That's all she has to do. This is a picture of a requisition and how it looks in the repository once it's saved. So the requisition is their job rec, and all of the applications that come in for a forklift job are tied back to that requisition and stay with that requisition in an individual folder on our network. This is an example of our template data that we use to cross-post to the job boards. For Monster, we pick the category, we pick the 2 categories in occupation subtype, and then Career Builder and Milwaukee Jobs just kind of post it where they think appropriate on their websites, but it's simply a drop-down box and a click. This is an example of what our job looks like after it's posted on a Monster search page, delivery driver Kenosha, with the salary and all the other requirements included. And then this is what it looks like when you click on that and open it up. This is how it posts directly from our system. We have embedded a link in that application that brings the applicant back to our employment form and fills in the job that they're applying for them. Oops, I did something here. This is a picture of our job application, and it's pretty long. And based on what I've seen in some of the other classes that I've taken here, I'm probably going to go back and paginate it and do some other things to make it more visually appealing to an applicant when they come in to fill it out, make it a little bit easier and more streamlined. But this is how it looks today. Once the applicant clicks the Submit button, Workflow again takes over and the form is routed to the hiring manager for review, not to our recruiting manager, but to the hiring manager. Because we are so geographically segregated, hiring is done at the location that needs the person. So the hiring manager actually takes over at this point. So when an applicant applies, an email with a web link to the job application is routed to the hiring manager. The manager can open it from their desktop, iPad, or iPhone and make a decision on that application. Additionally, Workflow sends the applicant an email acknowledging receipt of their application at the same time the hiring manager receives their email notification. At this point, the application exists in the manager's email, but also if they've uploaded a resume, that comes across too. So they get both the application and the resume in a single email for them to review and make a decision on. So here's a snapshot of our repository showing the job requisition and the applicants that are tied to it and their statuses. Applicant status is tracked using metadata. So you can see at a glance where each manager is at in the hiring process, and I've got a bigger picture of a more extensive repository shot that's going to show a lot more statuses shortly. The statuses can be found in a drop-down box on the hiring template. If an applicant does not qualify for the job that they have selected, then a reject status is selected by the manager. An email is then sent to the applicant after a 24-hour delay, letting them know that we will not be moving forward with their application, and then, of course, thanking them for considering Steinhafels for employment. Their application is then moved to a rejected folder, and only the qualified applicants remain tied to the requisition. If an application is moved forward, their status is changed to prospect, and the application is renamed and stored again with the requisition. This is a broader view of our repository. The first items that you see on the top that all say applicant, those are employment applications that have not been reviewed. First interview, anybody who has been scheduled for a first interview. Prospect, anybody who has been deemed qualified but not yet had any other action taken with them. And then, of course, when I took this snapshot, I had one in there that was rejected. After a brief delay, that rejected applicant is moved out of the repository and stored in the rejected applications folder. Once the hire status is updated, demographic information, so we've now taken our applicant and said we're going to hire them. It's a hired status. Demographic information is extracted from the application and inserted into a SQL database. The information in the SQL table will be used for the remainder of workflow activities. So, what happens first? There's a big workflow attached to this piece, and a lot of pieces execute simultaneously and at different times. First, the hiring manager receives another email that contains the new employee ID that is generated from the SQL table and an embedded link to the new hire form. The link takes the manager to that new hire form. Once the form is submitted, in parallel, the following things occur. We create a new employee file. We send a welcome letter to the employee. We send departmental emails to all of the different departments with the information that they need for new employee setup. And then the application and resume are routed back to the personnel file. Then the process stops. So why do we use a new hire form too? Because there is information that just cannot be mined from an employment application, such as salary, work schedule, work location, start date, start times. All of those things are not found on the employment application, so we need to gather those before we can route to other departments and let them know by when they need the new employee set up. So we do that with the new hire form. For ease of use, once the manager inserts that new employee ID, the form pre-populates with everything that we can take off of the employment form, so there is no duplicate entry needed to be done by the manager other than the fields that we don't have. So this is an example of our new hire form. The number of departmental notifications that are sent out depend on the number of checkboxes that are on the new hire form. So for instance, a warehouse employee would not need a voicemail setup, but a salesperson would need voicemail, email, GERS, telephone. So it depends on the position, what the manager wants them to have access to. And the final product looks like this. We have a personnel file that's been created, and it contains two items. It contains the application, and if there was a resume, the resume routes with the application to the personnel file, and it contains the new hire form that the manager has filled out. The workflow shown here distributes the new employee information to each department that needs to do employee setup. Each of these emails is customized so that the department only receives the information that they need to do the setup and nothing more. Shown here are two of the templates that we use to manage data in the system. We use template data to manage personnel records and I-9 forms. Additionally, the template data is used to automatically manage the number of documents in the system as well. So for instance, I-9s are automatically purged when the template data triggers a workflow to delete those records. Basically, this allows us to keep what we need in the repository and eliminate the stuff that we do not need to manage. After departmental setup is completed, Laserfiche forms are used to move an employee through the onboarding process and then memorialize each of those interactions back to their personnel file. So the new hire paperwork, because different jobs require different things, my department has set up a web page. So if you're hired in sales, you get the sales web page, and it has boom, 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 boom. If you're hired in warehouse, you get the warehouse web page that has all of the documents related to that job function. Delivery drivers, sales, managers, etc. So we've customized the web pages so that the onboarding process is very smooth and seamless. The new employee moves from one form to the next form to the next form. The only piece of paper that we generate, and I use this term loosely, is the I-9 form, which I'm going to go back and automate as soon as I get back from Laserfiche conference. But once that form is signed by the employees, we do upload it along with the documentation into the form, and thereafter it's managed by the system. We also use Laserfiche forms to acknowledge specific employment policies that are critical to our business, and to memorialize training events, because after an employee completes their initial onboarding documentation, we now need to train them. We need to train them on the timekeeping system, their employee self-service portal, the safety requirements, that we're a big safety-oriented company, so safety is big. So for instance, an employee would go to the learning management system and watch a bloodborne pathogen training module. At the end of the module, we have an embedded Laserfiche link back to the bloodborne pathogen acknowledgement form, where they sign off on each of the high-level things that we want them to take from the bloodborne pathogen training, acknowledging that they've seen all of the items in the training, and signing the form, clicking submit, and it's filed in their personnel file. So we track training in using forms, and the repository keeps all of those documents in one place. The biggest advantage that you have using the Laserfiche repository is the flexibility to store all different types of data in the same system. You don't have to remember where a voicemail was saved for this, or where you put a piece of video file. If it relates to your employee, you can put it into this system. This is one of my more unique employees. So, saved in his file, of course, are all of his new hire paperwork, all of his onboarding, all of our touches to that employee. Additionally, we've got correspondence that we saved into his personnel file using Laserfiche Snapshot. We've got email exchanges between myself and this gentleman that I have saved into the repository using Laserfiche Snapshot. And then, of course, I've got voicemails that this kind gentleman has left for me, or recordings of telephone calls that I've had with him. He's a unique individual. But it's all in one spot. I don't have to go and find it anywhere else. All of my touches are here. So, earlier Lynda said that I had 36 forms. I did, but beyond those HR forms, this is everywhere that I've deployed Laserfiche forms throughout my company. I've got a Wells Fargo financing change form for my customers. I've got the big green egg ordering form so my employees can order their big ceramic cookers from a vendor who gives us special employee pricing. I've got training, I've got sales standards, I've got phone interview guidelines, I've got sales goal sheets. We have deployed this product everywhere. Now I'm going to touch a little bit on what are you going to do with your old paper files. There really are only two strategies. You can leave them alone, or you can convert them. We opted to convert them, and we used quick fields to speed up the process. Now comes the really fun part. You get to clean the junk out of your employment files. Out of the 625 files, we removed income verifications that were older than 6 months, closed garnishments, unemployment verifications, old benefit forms, all that stuff you just never have the time to go back and get rid of that's no longer relevant to what you need to manage your employee today. Now's your chance. And we filled 2 full-sized, locked confidential shredding bins full of documentation that just was no longer relevant. It's another plus to being in an old company with long tenure that's been in business 80 years. You have lots of junk in your files. Then we organized our documents, and we really organized our documents into 11 subcategories. I would not recommend that ever again. If I had to go back and do it all over again, I would not subsort into 11, but you don't know what you don't know till you get into it, and then you think, why am I doing this? So at a minimum, the maximum, I would say, would be 5 categories: employment documents, performance reviews, training, disciplinary, and then, of course, confidential information would be the 5 that I would recommend for subsorting, for converting paper files. Then we used quick fields. We created an employee identifier sheet with just the employee number on it. Then we put in our subsections with the documents underneath. What Quick Fields was able to do was go out, read the number, go do a lookup to a table, come back with the employee name and fill in the template data, store it to the system, and then we did a second Quick Fields sort that pulled the gross employee packet back in. It now subsorted the employee packet into employment documents and other things. It saved those files, it uploaded them to the repository, it found the employee file, and it put them in the correct subfolders. And we would literally drop a stack of employment documents into our scanner this big, and it would take 10 minutes. The longest part of converting your file is the file cleaning and sorting, not the scanning. It took us about 4 months, and my staff finally yelled, "Uncle," and said, "Please, please, please, would you just hire somebody?" So I did. All right, so this is how the converted files were named. Anything saying back file, employment number, and then the name of the type of documents underneath it. Back file, employment number, name of the documents. We're going to get into security in a minute, but one thing I'd like to kind of point out here, the confidential folder that exists cannot be accessed by any manager who has rights to that folder unless they are HR. They don't even know a confidential folder exists. So again, our view was put all the employee documents all together under their heading, not separate some here, some there. The security and rights is so robust in Laserfiche that you can do this. No one even knows that file exists. So let's talk a little bit about security. How do you keep managers from accessing the information they need and not the information they really don't need to know? We use groups to let managers see only what they need to see. So the beauty of groups is if I replace a manager, I don't have to go out and figure out which files they need access to. I delete them from the group and I put the new manager back in that group. And that's about as complex as it is. The initial setup is a little cumbersome and there's a lot of bells and whistles, but my VAR showed me how to do the initial setup, and then I went through and did all the initial setup, and it just wasn't that tough. So, to give you an idea of how robust the security is, the accounting department can only see this folder, and that's all they see. The rest of their page is blank. The store managers can only see these 2 folders. Receiving can only see this folder in the repository, and HR can see everything because we are the gatekeepers for the Laserfiche suite of products. So where do you begin? This is the question I get most often. How do I start? How do I do an RFP? How do I build this? Well, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time? Sit down with your team and list what's frustrating you the most. What's the most tedious task they do? And tell them you can take it away from them and you can make it easier. We literally put up giant Post-it notes across my office wall, and then with markers sat and doodled and drew and said, what if we go here and can we make it do this? Once we kind of had it visualized in our mind, we sat down and just with bullet points said, step A, boom, step B, boom, step C, boom, and you just write it out. It's a little tedious, but it will save you tons and tons and tons of time reworking. Reworking will slow down your implementation. It just wastes time. Now, with that said, once I handed this to our VAR, they looked at it and they said, this is the most complete RFP we've ever seen, but we've got some ideas for you. Listen to your VAR. They work with lots of different businesses and they've seen it done a lot of different ways. They actually talked us out of some points because they said your benefit will be this much and it will take this much programming to do it. And talked us into doing some other things. So they were really helpful once we gave them the roadmap of saying, do this, not that. So they have lots of experience that you can draw from. So why are we as successful today? We have only had the Laserfiche product implemented up and running since August of 2013. And we've deployed it everywhere. It was our willingness to become experts in the software. Now, when I say experts in the software, are there any IT people in the room? Okay, sorry guys, we don't need you. Okay? This is what I'm going to, I love you, I just don't need you. This is what my IT department does for Laserfiche. They set up my server, they monitor the processes, and occasionally they install an update for me. That's it. Pardon? Oh, no. They have bigger fish to fry than this, and they're more than happy to jettison their workload to the HR department. Once we learned how to build workflows, we copied and pasted and changed what we needed. It wasn't that tough. Laserfiche Forms is a breeze. Just drop and drag. Now you can get really curious and like me who dove into learning HTML and learning CSS and learning a little bit of JavaScript. I'm really dangerous right now. And, you know, I've called my VAR and said, why isn't it working? And they said, well. So I use my VAR when I can't get something to work, but they've trained us so that we really are pretty self-sufficient and we don't need IT support to get done what we need to do. Of course, the HTML programming and the talking to other websites, that's what I use their expertise for because I don't need to learn to reinvent the wheel. They can do that. But everything else in the system we built and deployed ourselves. And I just built and deployed an expense reimbursement form where I made all of the table add up. It's really cool. I'm really proud of myself. Got it to route, goes to payroll, gets a manager approval. I think I'm really cool. But it's a lot of fun playing with this project because when you stop and think about what you can do, your imagination just goes, wow. So that's kind of why we've really become a very adaptive company of the Laserfiche suite of products. And unfortunately, Laserfiche only gave me an hour because I could be up here for 4 talking about some of the initiatives that we've done. And you're only limited by your imagination and your willingness of a company to take a step outside of their comfort zone and get rid of the paper. You just don't need it. So, any questions? Yes?
Are you using forms or user authorized what?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What part of forms are you using? Is it portal? Is it authenticated user? Is it
We're using authenticated user, but it's got a public rights to a forms button. So anything we publish to our employees that doesn't require interface within the system, we just hang on our intranet and they go out and they click on the direct deposit form and they fill in their info and they click submit and it goes, an emailed copy goes to payroll and another copy goes into the personnel file. Yes?
Right, so you do have the public portal as well as the user authenticated, and you've said you have about 700, or not quite 700 employees, or
750.
750. That's a lot of named participants. You probably didn't buy that many forms, so
No.
you just okay. So you mainly do most of it through portal.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about how this interfaces or works with your payroll system and what you had before, what you have now?
Okay, sure. It does not interface to my payroll system. It will interface to my time system, to my applicant tracking system no longer exists. That's a $7,000 a year support cost that I saved. And it interfaces with my LMS system. I actually am going to be replacing my payroll HRIS system to a SQL backbone specifically so I can get Laserfiche to integrate to that this year. So now I can take all the information off the employment application and port it to the payroll system, and the employee just appears. So that's the goal. Anything else?
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Can you talk a little bit about how your workflows post those that metadata up to the job sites?
Unfortunately, no, I can't. That was created by Cities Digital, and they could tell you exactly what the interface was. I know we posted the data to an FTP site, and then from the FTP site, it's imported into the job boards, but I don't know what format that needed to be when it went across.
You mentioned $7,000 savings on what?
Oh, when I replaced my HR Smart applicant tracking system, I saved $7,000 a year in support costs. That's a
And-
cost that just went away.
Could you talk a little more about the ROI, the return on
Sure.
investments, in terms of savings and?
Sure,
Yeah.
in terms of savings. Well, we have 700 employees, and we have 3.5 HR people that manage 700 employees, 700 plus employees. So had I gone further down the road, I would have had to have added another 1.5 FTE, which would have cost about $45,000 a year, plus benefits for those FTEs, plus additional investments in computers, another $16,000 in work cubes, because I needed to expand my office, add 2 additional work cubes at $8,000 per work cube. And then, of course, the support costs and other things that we had to invest in to get them up and going, the computers, the licensing, et cetera. And that would have been just that. Now, had I grown another 200 employees, I would have added another body and another 200. We're in a growth mode right now, so I'm in the future. Conservatively, we're going to be able to manage the HR functions of Steinhafels until I get to, I think, 1,100 employees with 3.5 FTE.
Wow, thanks.
Two questions. First of all, is payroll part of your department, or is that a separate department?
Yes, it's part of my department.
Those 3.5 FTEs, that's including payroll?
No, that is excluding payroll.
Excluding payroll. And were you the primary designer and of setting up all those workflows, and are you the administrator for the Laserfiche system?
Yes, I am the administrator for the Laserfiche system, and no, it's a team effort. While I had a vision for what I wanted, my team actually helped me on paper design all the bells and whistles that we put in our wish list. Because these 3.5 FTEs have to be able to execute what I build. And then the person that did the initial setup was Cities Digital. They did the bulk of, we designed all the forms. They just showed us how to do it. We did all the forms. But they did all of the behind the scene linking to FTP sites and linking to our vendors for background checks and linking to our vendors for employee assessments. So they did all of that work for us. And that was part of our setup agreement with them.
Thank you, a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Anything else? Well, thank you all very much for your interest today, and enjoy the remainder of the convention.
Fantastic job. Thank you.